Since they turn the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fray. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Seen Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Punch Show. Today, we are joined by one of my absolute favorite accounts to follow on both Blue Sky and Twitter, Christopher Webb at CWebb Online. Welcome to the show, Christopher. Are you ready to step into the light where the real facts glow?
I am. You can hear me okay this time?
I can hear you fine now.
Excellent.
What do you think of my jam and theme song?
Pretty cool. Yeah, I still see a countdown going on there, but I don't know what that is. But yeah, no, it's cool.
Countdown?
On my screen, it's counting down. I don't know why.
Oh,
anyway.
weird. Okay. I don't even know how I first came across your account, but I just started following you probably a few years ago now. And, I think it was during like the whole George Floyd protest thing. And I always found you were insightful, and like a lot of people just kind of retweet, I just post the same stuff everybody else is posting. And I feel like you're more the one that is originating stuff. So, but one of the things what's that?
I said, thank you. That's a huge compliment. Appreciate it.
So this is something we talked about a couple of seconds before, we went on air. And during the George Floyd protest, it became almost like faddish to support Black Lives Matter. And I don't know if it's because everybody was sitting at home with nothing else to do. And since then, I would say things have changed a little bit. And I'm not just talking about corporate America, which definitely has changed. Like they went from, let's support DEI to let's run as fast away from DEI as we can. And I think, it seems like when it was happening and there was all this talk about allyship, I would, some of my Black friends were like, not convinced that it was real, I'll say. And since then they've been vindicated. So, but for me, I've been anti-racist for 35 years now, and before it was a term. And then, I won't go into the whole story about how that happened, but to me, it's always been about just recognizing racist thoughts and ideas that come up in my head when they happen, and then automatically, actively rejecting those thoughts and actively reaching out to Black people and making friends with Black people and getting to know Black people and listen to Black people instead of condescending to Black people and saying, I'm your ally or whatever. But what are your thoughts on all that? How can we as well-meaning white people support Black causes without coming off like condescending liberal assholes?
Well, the first thing I would say to that is listen. When there are Black voices on social media, there's a tendency, like even for myself, and I kind of put this under the microaggression category. There's a lot of allies out there that are amazing, that have great voices and that boost Black voices as well. But a lot of times I'll post something on social, and then a white person, and definitely not the majority, a white person will come on and be like, well, you know, this group does that too, or whatever. And it's like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, you know, Black men, or I'm talking about, you know, like they want to come in and shift the narrative. Particularly, I find it with liberal white women. That's the case for some reason. I don't know why. But the microaggressions, and, you know, I was mentioning to you earlier, leading into the election, I felt like I had to defend Black men in particular, because as a voting group, because the media, and that was definitely like mainstream media, cable news, not so much, you know, the social posters or whatever you want to call them, but they were really trying to say, oh, Biden is losing Black men. And where my point was, I don't care what you say, the most loyal voting bloc in the Democratic Party are Black women, and the second most loyal voting bloc are Black men. Yeah. Every cycle, they always try to do the same thing. Oh, Black men are leaving the party or whatever. And every time the numbers, after it's all said and done, show that Black men did not leave. I will say, after this election, the numbers show that there were Black men that left, but they were in the younger range, like my son. He obviously voted for, well, not obviously, but he voted for Kamala Harris. But that's where we lost Black men, but it wasn't in huge numbers.
And it was like 80% instead of 90%, right? Like,
yeah, and where you're actually, I'm Gen X, my age range actually voted slightly more for Kamala Harris than Biden. I mean, depending on what numbers you're looking at.
Oh, wow.
So that was.
Hey, Chris, we lost your mic. I think that phone thing is happening.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay,
we're good.
So I think once again, it was. I actually had fights with people on social about that, and I just don't feel. And actually, I will say that a couple of the voices were large Black voices that were actually reporters. We were DMing, leaving voicemails. I was like, man, don't do this to us, because honestly, right now, I don't believe that's going to be the case where we're peeling off. I want to link this to one other thing, is what's happening here. What's been happening after the election, immediately on election night, where we realized Kamala, it's not looking so good for Kamala, right? Immediately there were some reports that Latino men peeled away, that like from the exit polls. And so this is more about people of color too, than just Black people. Immediately on social, it was like Latino men are the reason why Kamala is losing or lost the election. And what I always go back to is, we haven't won the white vote in 50 years.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe in coming down on people of color for listening to Donald Trump or not believing the Democratic Party has anything for them. Because even going to the election, my son was like, what is the Democratic Party doing for me? He's lucky because he has a father who has stayed on message, has been like telling him, for years. And actually he was Kamala Harris was in danger at one point of losing his vote, which is a whole nother story, but he voted. But I just think that
about that whole thing about what has Kamala Harris, or what are the Democrats doing for me? The Republicans weren't offering anything better. They were offering something worse. Nobody ever asked, what is the Republican Party going to do for me? It was always, what is the Democratic Party doing for me? Why not the Republican Party?
Yeah, it's definitely one-sided. And I mean, honestly, this, the party is in the toilet with the branding right now. Like I think that we need to just start over and rebuild. For the years, I was like, I'm not a progressive. But I always agreed with progressive policies. But I recently realized, you know what, own it. I'm a progressive, but I'm a pragmatic progressive. I don't believe in, the perfect being the enemy of the good. If you're in a conservative state and your candidate's policies aren't progressive, I'm not going to bash that candidate. What good does that do us? That's right for that territory. And I think we also have to be better about not getting too involved in local elections unless we're from that area. Like I'm not from Mississippi. I was helping Mississippi with their election, but I knew that the governor race was going to go back to Republican all along.
Yeah.
So I worked on amplifying Mississippi corruption and amplifying other Black voices and stories. But yeah, it's anyway. Yeah, going back, you had mentioned Black Lives Matter. It was very different back then. I can't say I was skeptical of it because so many people in my life were white and they were going to the rallies. It felt genuine. You could tell that like corporate America was like that. I didn't feel it so genuine. It was like, where have you been? All of a sudden, Amazon did have their little Black Lives Matter series of movies you could watch. They never did that before. And it's kind of the same thing they do with LGBTQ causes. They do that once a year. So, but I felt like from the people, it felt genuine to me. But I think it's been a really bitter pill after Trump was elected. And not that I didn't see this coming, but the whole anti-DEI thing is really, it's a lot to deal with because, hearing, oh, if I see a Black pilot, I'm scared to fly. Or, and for me, it's the opposite. I was just like, okay, they had to work twice as hard to get that job, just get that job and stay in that job. And to get this perception that if you're in a certain position, it's because you were Black is just crazy. And I think that what's happened is Trump was extremely successful at you're losing because they're gaining.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
So I think that's been the perception for years. I mean, he's not the only one doing it, but that was the perception. If a Black person's in that position, or you lost that position because a Black person or woman got that position. And that's just, I mean, honestly, there should be enough for all of us. There really is. And in my family, education is a big deal. Getting jobs is a big deal. We take that seriously. And it's not about being, getting a position because you're Black. I just don't look at it that way.
This actually is a great segue into one of the things we wanted to talk about, Charlie Kirk, because I think he was one of the big voices, especially like with this pilot thing, which for those who don't know, there is a shortage of pilots. And so what happened is that it used to be that people would, like all the pilots would come out of the military, then they'd become airline pilots. And almost all of those pilots were white males. So it was like 95% of all pilots were white males. And then what happened is, baby boomers started retiring. And so the pilots started diminishing. So the airline said, oh, we need to find more pilots. And plus, with being at war for 20 years and stuff, the number of retiring pilots from the military was waning. So they had to get more pilots. And also, the airline industry grew. So all of that together meant they had more positions than pilots. So what they started doing is saying, okay, where can we go that we haven't gotten to recruit before? And they started to go to HBCUs to recruit pilots and say, we'll train you. And so it went from 95% white male pilots to 80% white male pilots. And Charlie Kirk wants us to believe that 15% was unqualified Black people that stole white people's jobs. And it's like they need, like, if you're like a young man right now or a young woman, I don't care what race you are, look into getting a pilot. That's a guaranteed way to getting a well-paid job, because there is just there's just not enough pilots. And so it's not even like they're taking white people's jobs. They're filling job vacancies when there's still more job vacancies. But Charlie Kirk says when he sees a Black pilot, he assumes that he has to assume because of DEI, which isn't a quota system, And, that means that black person was less qualified than some white person that they beat out for the job. But then when, he gets shot, everybody's like, oh, you're taking it out of context. That's not what he meant or whatever. But it's exactly what he said. And it's exactly what he meant. And he's misrepresenting DEI to make it equivalent with affirmative action, which those are two entirely different things. Anyway.
Well, yeah, what is DEI? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't have a problem with that. And I think that something is wrong with people if they have a problem with that. If corporate America benefits when there are Black people, Latinos, women at the table, because they don't make these stupid mistakes. Do you want my money? Do you want me to spend money at your store, Target? And so that's been a problem. But talking about Charlie Kirk for a second, I will say this to anybody. Charlie Kirk was a bigot. And it wasn't just about pilots. It was about everything in regards to Black folks. He went on and on and on. But I think there's a lesson to be learned. I'm not celebrating his death. It is what it is. But the lesson I think that can be learned from Charlie Kirk is he went there. He went to colleges. Democrats ceded that space. So he spent years on college campuses attracting men with his message of bigotry, inclusive for white folks, for men, you're losing because Black folks are gaining or women are gaining. His message was not positive towards white women either. Democrats assumed that these young people are going to vote blue because if you look historically, the younger demo has voted for Democrats and they didn't go to those spaces. And so now you have the DNC or different politicians go where the people are. Where were you before? They weren't going to these college campuses. They ceded that space. So Charlie Kirk's message was all they heard. They didn't hear from Democrats. So what did you expect to happen? And so I think I don't really feel like they've learned that lesson. Like even with, this is going off course a little bit, but if you talk about Mamdani in New York, people are so focused on whether he is not an ally to Jews or however, whatever's going on in New York. But honestly, I think the bigger takeaway is how is he campaigning? He's actually reaching people and talking to them. He's actually an example of going to where the people are. I'm not a New Yorker, so I don't have a dog in that race, but I am learning from him. I am listening to him, and I'm trying to get that over to some of our political candidates. Because also what's happening in the party now, the lesson that I think they learned from 2024 was, we have to learn how to talk to white men. We have to do podcasts. And what they're doing is they're co-opting some of the language from the right. Woke. We have to, this is too much wokeness happening. And honestly, woke, I consider that the way white people are using it right now, that I consider that a microaggression because that word started in the Black community.
I refuse to use it.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Only Black people can be woke.
Yeah. Well, but they, look at Ron DeSantis, stop woke act and all that. So immediately I was like, I am not using that word anymore. I consider, so if you're using it as a pejorative, and that's what's happening to some people in the party right now, in our party, they're using it as a pejorative, you're insulting me. And like I said earlier, we're, Black men and Black women are the most loyal demographic in the party. And so I'm all about being inclusive. We, as a party, we kind of shun white men. We have, toxic masculinity. That's just dumb. We should not shun people away. We should welcome, it's workers and all that stuff. But I think we're running into it. You don't want to lose me as a voter. You don't want me to be a registered independent. And by you using a Black word against, making it a pejorative, you are turning off Black voters. So in my opinion, do what try and gain white voters that you may have lost with the values of the Democratic Party, speak to their issues, but don't do that by insulting me. And then they have to, we have to listen and we have to engage, right? We have to engage with that demographic. But if you really look at it, like what I mentioned, we haven't gained white voters in 50 years. We haven't won the white vote in 50 years. You lost a little bit of black men. You lost Latinos. Who do you think is going to be easier to regain?
Right.
I think it's easier to regain those black men and the Latino voters with everything that's going on right now than maybe these white men who we lost for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the issue I have right now. I am totally pro-Democrat because of what they've done over history. Since the party kind of shifted from being racist, but before my time. But I think we're making so many mistakes, and I don't think we've learned the lessons. And I say we, I'm not a politician, but I am a Democrat.
I've been saying that there's been a lot of criticism that we lost because of the culture wars. And I've been saying, no, we lost because we conceded the culture wars. Yeah. We didn't fight back on it at all. We didn't fight back and say, defend DEI and defend, that Black Lives Matter and defend that transgender people actually exist. We conceded all the culture wars, and because of that, we lost. I think that's the votes.
Now it's become toxic to say, I'm for Black Lives Matter, or I'm anti, or I'm for DEI and all that stuff. So that's where we are. So it's a really tough spot, and I do get that. I do understand that, but don't insult me. Don't. Listen, Target is learning a really hard lesson right now. They welcomed the Black community. Okay. They welcomed our dollars. They promoted Black brands in their store. The minute Trump was elected, oh no, we're going to end our DEI programs. Okay. That was one thing. And they weren't the only ones who do that. But then they spit in our faces by saying, actually, we're not going to showcase Black brands that we helped build up. So you can say what you want about somebody like Amazon. They were never really trying to build their brand on Black skin. Target did that, and then they spit on us. So, for me, me and my wife, we've not been back to Target since January, and we're not going back. And that was not an easy thing. My wife she lived on her Target pickups. She was like, well, what are we gonna do now? I'm like, we'll find something else, and we did. So,
no, I have friends on Facebook that are the same, that used to be all about Target this and share Target sales, and now they refuse to go. But I wanted to go back to something that you made me think. I had not had this thought before, but you were talking about how, like, with Charlie Kirk, they were in Turning Point, they were going after the college vote, and we conceded that space. And I was thinking, like with the protests against the Gaza war, and the Democratic Party consistently denounced the protests. Which, if they had leaned into the protests and said, they've got a point, let's work towards a two-state solution. They're murdering Gazans by the tens of thousands. We need to find a better way. And then they could have earned those instead of refusing them.
Yeah. I mean, they ran scared, right? I mean, that's how it felt at the time. And looking back, I think they did. I think that we also lost because we still have this reputation of being pro genocide, which I don't think is deserved. I mean, I will say Kamala Harris, at least 3 times that I heard, she called for a ceasefire, but her hands were tied. That was not the policy of the administration. I mean, they did want a ceasefire, but we were still sending weapons. We were still sending money policy to Israel without any demands, without saying, like, you can't do this to people. So very early on, Palestine, Gaza there was an allyship with the Black community because they are brown people. So, and they were oppressed, but then it became, and I'm not going to, I can't speak for all Black folks on this, but then it became, we're not going to vote for Biden. We're not going to vote for Kamala Harris, meaning these these Palestinian groups, and it became very tough for me. I am pro-Palestine, but it was very tough to ally myself with these groups because they were actually wanting to defeat our first potential Black woman president, and also the Democrats who were basically allied with my issues. And I saw the future being much worse for me here at home. Mm-hmm. So that's where I was kind of like, we'll deal with this part after. But I also think it really spoke volumes that I didn't see these people protesting Trump, and he never was going to be on the side of Palestine.
Yeah, right.
So, where are they now? Where's Jill Stein? Where's Cornel West?
Jill,
so that would be
in Moscow, hanging out with Putin.
Yeah.
But like, at least extended an olive branch to the protesters to say, we hear what you're saying, and we agree that all the killing is wrong.
That's very true.
We also have to acknowledge, like that October 7th happened, and this is not an easy thing to resolve, but we need to find a solution. Like, I think that's all they wanted to hear was just, you hear us, like just an acknowledgement that the Democratic Party heard them. I think could have gained some votes, like people saying, well, I feel better about Kamala. And I was saying, Donald Trump said before the election that for every drop they spill, we'll spill a gallon of their blood. And you're like protesting, and you're voting in a way that you're going to let that man be president. And do you think things are going to be better for Gaza under Trump? And I think it's pretty clear that it hasn't been.
None of us thought it was. And I don't even think they thought it was. I think they weren't really thinking into the future. But, again, like to your point, a huge mistake by the party. Like, it happened. We weren't listening, or they weren't listening to the Free Palestine movement and what that message was. And there was an opportunity for a Muslim woman to speak at the DNC convention. They vetted her speech. She was going to endorse Kamala Harris. They wouldn't let her speak. And that leaked into the community, the Free Palestine movement. And there was real anger there. And I don't blame them. That was such an unforced error. Let the woman speak. Let her speak. And they vetted her speech. It wasn't like she was, radical by any means. She wore a hijab. She was going to speak for her movement. I believe she was a local elected official anyway, and she was going to endorse Kamala Harris. Like, why would you not let her speak?
It was to me, I think that the just October 7th period created a situation that was almost impossible to navigate, because such a significant part of the Democratic Party, I shouldn't say significant, but a large enough percentage of the Democratic Party is both Jewish and Palestinian, and Muslim, that either way, like if you go either way, it's almost like you're going to cost the other side's votes, right? Like, so if they had gone too far in endorsing Palestine, then a lot of liberal Jewish people I know would have, we'd be just having a different conversation right now. But I think, like a way to say, we got to find a way to resolve this situation. I think that it's a situation very few Americans I've talked to actually understand what the real issues are here. They think of it as a religious war and not as a land war. And
do you ever really lose if you're on the side of humanitarianism? Like, do you ever really lose the message? And I think that Democrats just were too afraid to speak on that point. And it's just, but also, it's really hard to say that you're for humanitarianism when you're funding a war. And I think once Netanyahu had the really clear upper hand, where Hamas was like, they're not capable of doing an October 7th style attack right now, but he's still attacking and bombing hospitals because, we think there was some Hamas located in that basement. it's just, I don't know, it's just really hard to, I think people, even people that were silent during the election because we needed to get our candidate to win, are just done. It's just really, it's really difficult. And then, but I do think it adds salt to the wounds when you don't see the Free Palestine movement on Trump's heels.
Yeah. Where are they now? That's a great question. Things have gotten worse. Instead, the universities are conceding that now you're not allowed to protest, and it's been a lot as an anti-Semitic protest, which it has never been an anti-Semitic protest. It has always been a pro-Palestinian protest, and it's a false dichotomy to say that if you're saying don't murder Palestinian people, that means you're saying let's go murder Jewish people. It's like, I think both Jewish people and Palestinian people have a right to live. Like, how is that even a controversial position?
Yeah. I mean, also, if you look back at some of those, there were a couple of huge Free Palestine voices on social leading into the election. They're gone. They're not, like, especially on TikTok, they're not there. Like, where do they go? So, I mean, my Jewish friends, I think some of them are, I think Jewish people are on their heels right now because it's like there's been attacks on that community. So it's like, I think they feel limited to what they can say. They don't, they're not for a Netanyahu. Like, they think my friends think he's a terrible president, but they also feel under attack, which I get that too. That was, I mentioned Mondami, that was one of the issues I had with him. Like, I don't think it should be hard to condemn certain language if it's offensive to a community. It doesn't mean you're changing your outlook, but like, just change your language. Right. That's not hard to do. And I had a little bit of a problem with that, but other than that, I think he's on point with his campaign, the way he's been handling it.
I don't know if this is just a thought that just came to me. I don't know. I haven't fleshed it out, so sorry if it's completely stupid. But like, I remember from like the 90s, there was this big, almost like rivalry between Farrakhan and and his followers and some Jewish people about, like, there was this kind of infighting between the two groups over who was more persecuted, Black people or Jewish people, and there was all this rhetoric. And I want to say this. I want to qualify this with saying that, like, during the civil rights movement, the Black Americans' best ally was the Jewish American. That like Jewish Americans actually gave their lives for.
I think there's definitely an allyship there, 100%. Still,
there was this wedge driven in the 90s. Do you think that has any carryover to the current situation where there are people of color who are pro-Palestinian and almost as anti-Jew as they are pro-Palestinian? Or is that just like a thing that happened 30 years ago and everybody forgot about? Do you remember what I'm saying about the Farrakhan thing?
A little bit. No, I wasn't involved. I was pretty young for that. I mean, I think I do remember the rivalry in the sense of, like, people were saying he's anti-Semitic. But I was never really a follower or anything like that of his. And I don't really, he was not someone I followed. So I can't really speak to that too much, to be honest. But, and I don't really feel, I think to your bigger point, I don't feel there's a rivalry now between the Black community and the Jewish community at all. I just think, I think a lot of people, period, are just like, this war is anti-humanitarian and we have to do something. Like, why can't we feed people that are starving to death and eating, mud? Like, that's a humanitarian issue. And I don't care what your community is, you should be, able to speak to that. So I don't see now clashing between Jews and black folks. And I don't really see that on social.
Okay. As I said, it was a random thought that may be stupid, and so I'm not gonna fight too hard for that one. So if you were chair of the DNC right now, what would you do?
My real thought, which would probably get me in trouble, disband it, start over, rebrand it, build it from the ground up. There's too much.
But what would you focus on? Like, what would you like? Let's say there's,
I would lift younger voices, send them into communities on the ground, in addition to social, but on the ground in these communities, and have these conversations with folks. Come back, tell us what we need to do with our messaging, go back again, cede no space, be on all the platforms. This talk about go where the people are, I'm telling you, they're not going to where the people are. And they're back in the day, I wasn't involved in politics much then either, but the DNC Democrats, they had local offices. They helped communities, like speaking in the, for the Black community, they would actually like, oh, you need jobs, let me help you get a job. Or you have a court date, let me hook you up with so-and-so. There were actually people on the ground in communities. So it wasn't, so you could actually say, if somebody said, what is the party doing for me? Actually go and talk to Jimmy over there. He works at the office. They're working on Black issues in this community. That's not happening right now. And so you have this space where these voices from the right are speaking to fears. They're speaking to specifically the fears of young white men of being replaced or whatever you want to say it. And that's how they are winning. The DNC they're not speaking to communities. And if anything, they're afraid to dive deep now because they're busy thinking, how can we win back the broadcasters, And I think my message would be economic populism. The right has had cultural populism, culture wars, as you mentioned earlier. Democrats really haven't had an answer for that. But now I've been thinking about this a lot. The answer is economic populism. And that's what's happening now. The oligarchy tour, that was successful because they're saying like the oligarchs are out to take everything from you. Like everybody can relate to that. Luigi spoke to people, like what he did was obviously wrong, but most normal people have issues with their health insurance. Most people, when they put in a claim, they get the bill and they have to get on the phone with the health insurance company like, no, and you're billing me 3 times for the same thing. So people can relate to those things. They can relate to the fact that private equity is going into communities and taking over hospitals and making them for-profit centers and realizing that the emergency room is the most profitable part of the hospital. And so, which is awful for you and me, because if we need the emergency room, we can't shop. We can't compare prices. You're stuck there and you're paying the highest prices. So I think if the Democratic Party or the DNC is not working on those issues at the grassroots level, they are not ever going to get to where they need to be. Personally, I just don't see it. And social media is a big piece of that, but it's not everything. You have to be in the ground, in the communities on the ground. And it needs to be permanent.
I think, like when Tim Walz was named the vice president, there was there was a bit of a surge. Like he had a message that people responded to. And I think that's because one, he was an everyman. He was a middle-class dude, right? That had actually gone through the struggles of life. Not to say that Kamala wasn't, but
no, he was a teacher. He was a coach, very relatable.
And I think one of the things the Democrats have done, maybe starting with Clinton, is they've gradually stopped being the party of the union, being the party of the working man. And you talk about how you want to get back the Latino vote, the Black vote, the women vote, the white male vote, the vote of anybody that doesn't make 6 figures. Lean back into unions and workers' rights. And like that's part of what you're talking. Like whether it's like technically unions or not, but we are not serfs. We do not exist to labor on behalf of the elite oligarchs. Like and so it's like when it comes to unemployment benefits, when it comes to insurance, like you said, like you said go on the phone. I had a AFib, and so I had to go and get a what they call an ablation, where they do this thing where they kind of go in and clear out your heart stuff through this procedure. It costs $200,000 for my ablation. And so I get my bill and it's like the whole $200,000. And I'm like, why didn't my insurance company cover any of this? It's supposed to cover all but $6,000 of it. So it's like going to cost me $194,000 extra, which I do not have. I'm not rich. So I call up the insurance company and they're like, well, we didn't know if you had another insurance company that was already covering it. So we decline it. And then I had to call them and tell them that I didn't have another insurance company for them to cover it. Like, what kind of nonsense is that? Like, you should not have to do that. We need laws that protect people's insurance. And if you say this is covered, you have to cover it. If I'm paying the money, why am I paying you insurance if you're not going to cover my insurance? And, time off and vacations and, things like that. Like, we need to support, like, these are the issues I think that speak to everybody, not just.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say they need to be in these communities. They need to be in, like, speaking of the Midwest, a lot of the Midwesterners, they blame Democrats. Or there's small towns that become like lifeless or opioid centers or whatever. They blame Democrats because they left. And so whereas Trump and Republicans are speaking that, it's not genuine. Like I think it's really hard to find evidence that the Republicans are pro-union, as you said, like if you really look at the facts, but Democrats weren't speaking to unions for a long time. And what Democrats also do, I would say, in the West, like we've become like the coastal parties, right? Like the big cities. That's where they most of the action is, except during the election. Then they go to the battleground states. Same thing in state elections. They panic at the last couple of weeks, and then they speak on those issues. If they had people on the ground, if the party had people on the ground in these communities all year long, it would serve two purposes. One, those people are hearing from the party and they believe the party is listening to me. And then second, they would take those conversations back to the DNC or whatever we're saying that organization is, and spread that to the candidates. You could say that. You can hear me? Hold on.
Did I lose you entirely? Oh, there you go. You're moving. I can't hear you, but you're moving. Okay, You're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're clear.
Anyway, so that I just think we're losing on all those fronts because we're not actually in local communities, or the party isn't.
And my brother, he's running for a state representative in Texas, out in San Antonio, and he's in a R+30 district, and he's running, to try to flip it. He can't even get the Democratic Party to call him back.
I hear that all the time. And that's another huge problem. And, Texas has a very large Latino community, right? The party, Republicans are so much better at speaking to Latinos. The Democrats don't even know how to reach them. Latinos are mainly we're trying to talk to them on Twitter and all these spaces that they're not even on. They're on WhatsApp. They get a huge amount of information from AM radio. We need to build that infrastructure and have those investments on that media, and not act like we're talking to them on the spaces we're normally used to talking on.
You'd think with $1 billion, they could have found somebody that knew these things,
Well, they do, but they're not listening to the right people. I mean, yeah, they didn't find them, I guess, but there are people that know this. And they, I'm going to get an intern to do my translation into Spanish. Meanwhile, it's somebody that had AP Spanish in high school. They're doing really bad translations. And it's just, and then even the Latino community, I'm not saying it's an easy thing, because there are certain cities that are like predominantly Mexican. There's other ones that are predominantly Colombian or whatever, and they have very different
right
accents.
right
And it's like, it would be like an Irish accent telling an American, this is what you need to do for your economic well-being. They're not going to listen to that.
And this is one of those things that you have to actually talk to people to find out about. Like the Latin America is not one hegemonized community,
Mm-hmm.
Like you talk to Puerto Rican people and you talk to Mexican people, they have different views on different things, and you talk to somebody from Argentina or you talk to somebody from Chile, and it's like, we also act like nobody south of the border is educated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, very untrue, but I mean, what you said is true, but yes, they are educated, and in LA, we have I'm in LA. We have a very large Latino population. It's part of our culture here. And so like when they're doing these raids, when the Trump administration is doing these raids, it becomes like that first week when there were the first raids at Home Depot, it was like an earthquake here. Like the freeway, it almost was like COVID lockdown. Like the freeways were empty. We have a lot of street vendors here. That's part of our culture too. Gone. And there was like this little bit of fear. Like I'm in the garment industry, and we had our warehouse closed. We had to make sure we knew who we were. There was just this real fear. It's a lot better now, but these are people that work. These are people that are like, they're not criminals. In fact, if anything, they're less likely to be a criminal because they don't want trouble. They do not want trouble with the cops. And, I just want to mention this one other thing. ICE, at least here, we do have a gang problem. We do have areas of LA County that have high crime. They're not going there. They're afraid because they would get capped. And that just shows you their motivation. They're taking the low-hanging fruit. It's much easier to take the man on the corner that's selling, ice cream than to go where, I don't think too many people would argue. Like if you're an immigrant, an undocumented immigrant, and you are a real criminal, I don't think anybody's arguing like, okay, deport that person.
Yeah.
But you're deporting people that are working.
Yeah.
Or not causing problems. That should not be the focus.
And anybody that's ever read a history book on American history would know America. I mean, like, the foundation of the labor of America is two things. One, it is, slaves and sharecroppers at first, right? And also immigrants coming and willing to take low-wage jobs. And they're willing to take those jobs not because they're not capable of doing something better, but because they feel like if they take that job, their children can grow up and have a better life than they do, right? And this has been, and it's not like a race thing. It was Irish people. It was Italian people. It was German people. It was, like there's been these migrant surges. Every time like different nations have gone through famines or crises or whatever, the migrants have come over here in swarms, and they have been the ones that built America for the next generation of Americans. Like the hard labor has always been done by people of color and migrants. And the reality is people say, well, why don't they come over like my parents did? And it's because they can't.
It's very hard.
Your parents got off a boat and signed their name, right? There is no avenue, no realistic avenue for people from South America to come over here right now. Unless they have relatives or unless they have bachelor's degrees. And there just is no way for them to come over and do the construction work that they do, to do the hospitality work they do, to do the farm work they do. And we need people to do that work, because people aren't going to Harvard so that they can get this bill that they can't pay off so that they can go and pick strawberries in California.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we need people to do that work. So let immigrants that want to come over here and do it. And, like, there's always this rebuttal about, oh, if we free the slaves, who's going to pick our cotton? As though that's a fair equivalence. First of all, you're the asshole that wanted to send the slaves back to Africa after.
Well, nobody's entitled to free labor. That's first of all. Second of all,
but I just want one reason to just legalize these immigrants is so that we can pay them fair wages and pay them fair compensation. Like, you're actually solving both problems by making it easier for migrants to come over and take low wage jobs that Americans aren't willing to take. And it supports the middle class. It supports the small farmers. It actually is better for all of America to actually just legalize these workers. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so, I mean, I just want to make one point first, that almost without exception, the immigrants I know, they're working very hard and they send money back to their families in their country of origin. But if you want, like, to your point, if you just want to think of it even on a basic level, this is not smart strategy. You won election by saying you're going to make the economy better. How is it making it better if you're deporting the labor that you were speaking of, deporting the labor when nobody's, who's wanting those jobs? Like, they never really took your job. Like that. That is hard strategy.
I don't see people moving to California to pick strawberries.
I don't see the red hats, the red MAGA hats in the fields. Like, I just don't. They're not there. And and now the other part of that is he's making it very difficult for the highest skilled minds to come here and work.
Yeah. Or to even want to.
Yeah. So, like, did that nuclear scientist really take Bubba's job in Oklahoma? No. So it's like the whole thing does not make any sense. It's all about they're blaming brown people for your problems. And there's a lot of people that are like, this is what I voted for. They're still saying that.
And you're like, yes, this is what you voted for. You voted for inflation, you voted for tariffs, and you're proud of it because you're too stupid to understand that tariffs mean inflation when you're sitting there blaming Biden for inflation when it wasn't even Biden's fault. But
they're too blinded by hate and blame. And that's, fear is a very powerful motivator. And I think that people are willing to overlook a lot of the obvious shit, because they're pissed. And I think if anything's going to break the MAGA cycle, it's going to be economic pain. And we're only 9 months in. So
yeah. And like, as you were talking, I want to mention something about this. It's sort of like just dawning on me that what we're doing when we say, oh, the black people, blacks, we lost Latinos, we lost women voters, we lost white women. We're blaming we're blaming the marginalized people when we say, oh, it's because of the transgender issues. We're blaming all the marginalized people for Donald Trump. It's your fault, Christopher, that Donald Trump won. It's not white people's fault that voted for him.
All the time. You're talking my language, because I'm like, you're blaming these other groups. Like I said, white people haven't voted for Democrats in over 50 years. So, like, I don't know. I think like the conversation you're having, there needs to be more of that. And so, like, I say that this sounds really harsh, and I'll put the nuance on there, but white people need to talk to white people in the sense of own the fact that you're a white man and I'm talking about these issues. Like, it's wrong to think that it's not correct to think that brown people are taking your jobs, and here's why. They need to hear more from a white person. I say it all the time. I don't know if they're listening to me. So I'm just, that's why I say, like, white people need to talk to white people as a white person, not just as a Democrat, but like, I'm a white man and it's okay that I'm saying this. Like, I don't agree with Trump. And I think they need to own more of that.
That's a great answer. And, you know, I think part of, you know, like, just on my perspective, like, my whole journey through all of this was, I had like after the Reginald Denny, right, the Reginald Denny trial, I had a black, you know, I used to have, you know, like, I was in a church and we'd have a Friday gathering where we'd make dinner and have some friends come over from the church, and, you know, like, we'd eat dinner and then we'd play Scrabble. And, you know, some of my friends were black and they'd come over, and one of them was named Edgar. And we just started this year-long debate on how the Reginald Denny beating was different than the Rodney King beating, you know? And he was saying you can't equate those two things. And I'm like, well, how is 4 white people beating up a black guy any different than 4 black people beating up a white guy? And it took me a year to realize why it's different. You know, one was an action and the other was a reaction. And but one time we're debating, and it was like where I kind of like had my moment of epiphany. And I said, Edgar, see, that's your problem. You think of yourself as a black man, and I just think of myself as a man. And he said, no, the problem is you can just think of yourself as a man and not as a white man. And it was like an epiphany for me that I do not think of my race as part of my identity, because other people do not see me as a white man. They just see me as a person, right? But if a black person walks into a store, the store owner may see a black man and not a man. And so they'll monitor them to make sure they're not going to steal something. And and it only takes like 5%. I had this realization. Only takes if only 5% of white people are racist, if a black man encounters 20 white people a day, he encounters racism every single day. And so he is constantly reminded he's a black person. And so it's not like they can separate their identity, because society has made them identify that way. Whereas for me, it's different. And so I think in a lot of ways, we grow up in 2 different Americas. Mm-hmm. And it's not the black person's fault or the white person's fault. There is systemic racism, and it exists. And white people just need to acknowledge that you don't live in the same society as I do, you know?
Yeah. Well, I also say it this way, like, in the United States, white is the default race.
Yes.
And for black folks, but I would say most people of color, we have to answer for our entire race. Like, if a black person does something bad, it's black people. It's not just a man. And so, like, when we see these, you know, mass shootings, or we see these, you know, crazy things happening, we hold our breath. It's a collective, you know, heart palpitation. I hope that was not a black man, because we know, or woman, or whatever, we know we're all going to get blamed. And it's kind of like, you could look at it this way with Charlie Kirk. We were also holding our breath for that, but it's also like, immediately they blame liberals for that, right?
Yeah, right.
Kind of like this blame. So that's how it feels to be black. A little bit like, that's a little bit of a little insight into that. It's all the time. It's all the time. You know, I get so much hate on Twitter. Shocker, surprising. You know, like, I get so much hate in my DMs, in my replies too, but especially in my DMs. People saying, like, you need to be a better father. You need to, like, be with your family more. If black people were better dads, and, you know, with their I've been married for almost 30 years. I just celebrated my 29th anniversary. My wife and I raised 2 kids. They don't know me, but yet, black man, I use my real likeness on my accounts. He must not be raising his kids. It's crazy, the kind of stuff that people think. Now, those are like those are not my friends, you know. So I don't think all white people think like that, but it's definitely a thing. White people are the default race, and people of color, in particular Black people, we have to answer for our entire race when it happens, when something bad happens.
And it's interesting when it turns out to be a right-wing nut job that does something like that. Like when I think about this a lot, that and now I can't even think of Hawley. What was his first name? Dennis Hawley. Do you know who that is?
Mm.
Almost nobody does. That's the person that was a white supremacist that was shooting up a high school at the same time Charlie Kirk was shot.
Okay. No. Oh, in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
I did hear about it, but the oxygen was out of the room. Yes.
Nobody knows who that is. Everybody knows who Tyler Robinson is.
Yes.
You know, it's like, and it's like, we're talking about the left-wing violence, which, first of all, whether Tyler Robinson, I don't think he was left-wing or right-wing. I think he was a conflicted person who was raised in a right-wing home and accidentally fell in love with a trans person. And the dichotomy kind of drove him to blame Charlie Kirk and kill him. Like, I think he was an individual that shot a man because of a conflict that shouldn't have existed within him. Like, if he had just been, hey, it's okay to fall in love with a transgender person, he wouldn't have shot anybody.
So is it okay if I disagree with you?
Sure.
So so first of all, let me just say this. I thought Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Nick Fuentes all pretty much had the same messaging. And since Kirk was murdered and the left got the blame, I've gone down some rabbit holes. It's not as simple as it sounds. He was actually further right.
Oh, right. You're and I agree with, like, I think a lot of, like, the Nick Fuentes thing, right?
Yeah. And so that cohort hates women. They don't like women. And there's this whole, it's crazy.
Like the whole, I'm so straight, I'm gay.
Yeah. And then there's a trans segment. I'm trying to keep it simple here. Trans segment of that community, but they're trans because they're also relating to femininity, and they're trying to take both. It's not the same as like the trans people you and I know. They're trying to take the best of both worlds, the femininity, and then also the fact that they're still men, and they're actually companions for these women haters. I mean, so he was not a liberal. He was not left. He was further right than Charlie Kirk. And if you look at the Nick Fuentes cohort, I'm going to say, they hated Charlie Kirk. So we should not claim them. We should not.
The bullet etchings related to Nick Fuentes somehow?
Say that again.
The bullet etchings, the famous bullet etchings. That's like related to the whole Nick Fuentes culture, right?
I mean, yeah, but they're like very early on, they were saying they were pro-trans engravings on there. That was not accurate. They were saying that that song, I forget what it was. It was a Italian phrase. That's actually something that's very prevalent in Nick Fuentes, the gropers or whatever.
Yeah.
It all links back to that. It really does. And you're not hearing about it that much because our media is failing us. They are busy trying to say that, oh, Charlie Kirk was a decent guy. Like, they went along with it. And the minute anybody is on these shows and they say the truth, that actually he was a divisive figure and he was even the most mildest of criticisms, they're fired. You're not hearing about all this stuff with Nick Fuentes, which is the reality of what happened. And we probably never will.
Previous dinner guest of Donald Trump's, I might add.
Yeah, very true. So if you look at these people, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Nick Fuentes, there's others. They have different what would you say, platforms, I guess? I don't know what you would say, but I think they also speak to the fact that I would say we're probably not the same age, but we grew up at a time where your parents during the summer, like back when we had 3 months off during the summer, I was shoved out of the house like during the daytime, and we played with our friends. You were forced to meet people. You had to meet people. You met girls, okay, and outside.
Yeah.
And now people, maybe for the same reason, my mom was like, "Get out of my hair, go play, be back before dark." Now maybe we're more aware, and we don't want our kids outside playing and meeting strange people. But like, go to your room, use your iPad, go on TV. So our kids, not my kids, because I made sure, but our kids are actually going on Discord or all these sites, and they're meeting these disaffected groups.
Yeah,
and that's why it's happening. So like, raise your kids better. I don't know.
I like to joke, you're Gen X if you have near-death experiences your parents never knew about.
Yeah, it was like, were you? What was it? Were you? Are you hurt or were you injured? There's a difference. Like, if you're hurt, brush it off, go back outside. If you're
right.
So yeah, it was a different time. It was actually better, in a lot of ways, because I came up very beginning of MTV. So that was like my real dive into television, but there was no social media. There was no, other than the cartoons and whatnot, there was no social media back then. And so you were less likely to get,
nowadays it's almost like parents are letting social media raise their children.
I honestly relate it to the fact that our parents shoved us out the door, and people now are shoving them to their iPads or whatever, their phone, and they're on social. And of course you're going to discover these things. It's interesting. Yeah. And these people, and it's a community. And that's the other thing. This could be a whole topic for one of your shows, but like, how does religion play into this? Like, because it really doesn't feel like the right is that religious if you really look at what they're saying, but they're playing on the fact that it's a community.
It's like the so-called Christian right. There's a viral clip that Asen posted this morning or last night from Jesse Waters saying, "Oh, forget this turn your other cheek stuff, eye for an eye." And they're the ones that are supposed. Jesus said, "Forget eye for an eye, turn the other cheek." Like, that's literally the heart of what he says, right?
Right.
And like, I don't know if you're following James Talakino anymore, any at all, but he's this Texas guy. He's running for senator, and he's a Christian, and he said, I just really love what he said. Imagine if all the people who claim to be Christians really love their enemies. How much better would the world be right now?
He says a lot of amazing things. Like, I like him a lot. Like, I hope he does well. Because it's not like anyone's against Christianity or any religion, really. If that's your thing, that's your thing, and if that's what you believe. But like, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school, and we knew that the Bible wasn't a history book. And we studied the Bible, but it wasn't. It wasn't about. It was mainly about, like, if you think of what Jesus was, he was mainly against poverty, and he was about helping people and being kind and all those kind of things, like in very general, basic terms. And that's not what I'm seeing from the right. It's a lot of hatred.
I spent 15 years as a youth minister. I'd go to college campuses, read the Bible with students, just talk about them, shepherd them through their daily struggles and stuff. And I even wrote a Substack article on this, that the Christian right is actually the antithesis of the Bible. Like, if you think about it, the Bible says you cannot worship God and mammon both, right? And mammon meaning money. And what is capitalism other than the worship of money? Like, it's literally saying that money is the motive for everything, right? So is God your motive, or is money your motive? Are you a Christian or are you a capitalist? The two things are actually mutually exclusive.
Yeah. And, the hardcore MAGA, it's almost like they're worshiping Donald Trump. So it's just bizarre.
Not even almost. Well, they had an idol, a golden idol of Donald Trump that they literally prayed to. So it's like, we can just take the almost out of that, and they think they're not a cult.
Yeah, 100% they are a cult. 100%.
So I'm trying to think. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember what it was. But we're just over an hour and 10 minutes. So I think we can end things here. And do you have anything else you want to say? Do you have anything you want to pitch? You got anything you want to?
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I think I bitched a lot already, so maybe I'm done for now. But I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to speak. Yeah, it's good. I enjoyed talking to you.
I just feel like, I wish if we lived in the same city, I'd invite you over for dinner. You seem like, and your family, you seem like such a nice guy.
Thank
and
you.
You're so smart, and I just love talking to you. So I'll see you online. Thanks for coming on and giving an hour of your Saturday to do it.
I appreciate
that.
All right.
So it's at Webb Online is your Twitter.
It's my Twitter, my Blue Sky. Those are the two I'm most. Oh, also Substack, which I'm kind of new to. TikTok, I'm Left Coast Chris, and that's a long story on how that happened. But
what a tangled web we don't weave.
Yeah.
Nobody ever got you. Like when I see Webb, I always think Chris Webber was one of my favorite basketball players back in the day, even if he didn't know how to call a timeout.
I don't see him on Twitter, so I don't know, or X or whatever you call it.
I'm still calling it the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm still calling it Twitter. So
I have a Gulf of Mexico cap. Okay, it's the Gulf of Mexico.
So, all right. I appreciate you, Christopher. Thanks for coming on. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much. All right. See you around.